About 60 years after Meriwether Lewis and William Clark promised Indian communities along the Missouri River that the Great Father back east would look out for them, their fortunes still were not made. While the Civil War raged, Indian violence had exploded along the Minnesota Valley. Dakota warriors killed hundreds of settlers, burned farms, raided stores, and took hostages. Their chief, Little Crow, was killed by a farmer. Numerous warriors were hung at Fort Snelling and buried in a sandbar beside the Minnesota River. Brigadier General Alfred Sully marched captive Indians west across bone-dry plains to a camp on the Big Bend of the Missouri. That death march got little attention. Notably, by the 1860s, hostiles and friendlies among Plains Indians were already at loggerheads in council. An example of who some Native Americans labeled a traitor, but the United States awarded honors to, was Gabriel Renville, also known as Tehuacan, or Sacred Lodge. He opposed conflict with the U.S. during the Dakota War of 1862 and was a driving force within the Dakota Peace Party. In 1863, Renville volunteered to serve as a Dakota Scout during U.S. military leader Henry Hastings Sibley's campaign against warrior escapees from the Minnesota Massacres, including Wood Lake, orchestrated by Little Crow. From 1863 to 1866, Cavalry Commander Sully led expeditions against the loosely allied Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho. Notable battles were Whitestone Hills, a perfect massacre, according to one eyewitness, and Takahakuti, or Killdeer Mountain. Killdeer Massacre in 1864 forced some tribal members to escape to Canada. Other Army-Indian confrontations occurred at Fort Rice, at Big Mound, at Dead Buffalo Lake. In other words, the summer of 1864 in the northern high plains of North America was a tinderbox. Sioux communities there were the most militant, led by prominent war leaders like Sitting Bull and Gall, who are by then adopted brothers. Gall built his reputation by surviving several bayonet stabbings and had taken 7 scalps in a revenge at Fort Berthold. Northern Indian bands experienced declining bison populations. Commanding General Sherman advocated a bison elimination strategy. They also were witnessing, quote, voracious steamboats, consuming in their boilers all the timber along the rivers. Sully's attack at Killdeer was regarded by some Indians as the beginning of a direct military conflict with the U.S. More significant events were to follow, including the Sand Creek Massacre in today's Colorado and Battle of Julesburg along the Oregon Trail in the winter of 1865. A 675-man 3rd Colorado Cavalry under the command of U.S. volunteers headed by Colonel John Chivington, on November 29, 1864, attacked and destroyed a village of mostly elderly women and children of Cheyenne and Arapaho persuasion in southeastern Colorado Territory. Mutilations afterward highlighted ignoble hysteria that could drive U.S. troops to brutal and lethal behavior. Julesburg took place on January 7 between 1,000 Cheyenne Dog soldiers, Arapaho and Dakota, and about 60 Army soldiers, plus about 50 civilians. The Indians achieved some revenge there by defeating the soldiers, and over the next weeks plundered ranches and stagecoach stations along the South Platte River Valley. However, facing the overwhelming firepower of the expanding army, the Sioux were beginning to split into peacemakers, or defeated, and warriors. At this time also, the Montana gold mines were tantalizing to the post-Civil War U.S. government. The steamboat line on the Missouri to Fort Benton unloaded supplies on wagons that took prospectors up to the mountains, who then followed roughly the Oregon Trail into the Rockies. Already in 1863, John Bozeman, a Montana prospector, had led a small group of hopefuls from Fort Laramie to Virginia City in the northern Rockies. He selected a route crossing the Powder River, Little Bighorn, and Yellowstone, all right in the middle of the Sioux repose. As new treaty talks were unfolding along the Missouri, the Army dispatched 500 troops and more than 1,000 Pawnee and Omaha Indian scouts to secure the Bozeman Trail, considered then to be the shorter route through this part of the country. Brigadier General Patrick Connor, the, quote, father of Utah mining, who had overseen a massacre of Shoshone on Bear River in Washington Territory in 1863, had instructed the troops to kill every male Indian over the age of 12. Mirroring the Sand Creek atrocities, these soldiers killed some 250 Shoshone men, women, and children and returned to Salt Lake City as heroes. A joint Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho attack near the Little Powder River sent his men in retreat through a snowstorm, but little else was accomplished. Essentially, the First Great Sioux War broke out, 1866 to 1868, with major battles along the Bozeman in the Powder River country. Ogallala reported 100 white men killed at Fort Phil Kearny in the Wyoming Territory. One war party member later, quote, recalled that winter of 100 slain as a man may remember some bad dream. More particularly, the Federman fight, or the Battle of the 100 in the Hands, also the Battle of 100 Slain, was part of Red Cloud's war on December 21, 1866. Then, 10 warriors, including Crazy Horse, lured a detachment of U.S. soldiers into an ambush. All 81 men, under the command of Captain William J. Federman, were killed. It was the Army's greatest defeat in the West until that time, and the Bozeman Trail became unusable for immigrants. The next spring, 1867, a large Lakota Cheyenne council took place north of the Powder River Forks. The main attraction turned out to be a hung papa, quote, shirt wearer, a symbol of elitism, a man in a buffalo robe who was declared to be the medicine man who would command the people in peace or in war. Sitting Bull was now 36 years old. He, with Red Cloud of the Ogallala and Big and High Backbone of the Miniconjou, would guide the Lakota people. A U.S. Army officer branded Sitting Bull a, quote, fierce beast and one of the most dangerous and most ill-disposed Indians in Dakota. Only one solution was emerging in the American capital back east. The American armies by this time were issued modified Springfield breech-loader rifles. Finally, in 1868, a new Treaty of Fort Laramie replaced the 1851 Horse Creek Treaty. Sitting Bull and Company were introduced to a new, somewhat baffling compromise, creating a kind of Great Sioux Reservation that encompassed all lands west of the Missouri, across the Black Hills, and extended about 200 miles from south to north to include the White, the Bad, the Cheyenne, the Moreau, and Grand Rivers. The distinguished seven-member Peace Commission attending the treaty signing was undermined when the Senate dallied and stalled fulfillment of many of the agreement's stipulations. Of course, the Native Americans were even more put off.
The Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868, did not establish reservations for its Indian signatories, but marked boundaries for the different tribes to promote peace and provide safe passage for overland travelers. It permitted the government to build military forts and construct roads on Indian lands. Beyond distribution of numerous presents, the government promised to deliver annually for 50 years useful goods like domestic animals and agricultural implements, with a total value of $50,000 per year. The Senate later reduced these annuities to 10 years with possible 5-year extensions and up to $70,000.
At the same time, though, the treaty allowed the United States to build a railroad along the Platte country. That railroad along the Platte became the new thread of complaint and contention, especially as it brushed against the defined indigenous domain. This was the railroad to the Pacific. As the Union Pacific and Central Pacific approached their Utah meeting point in 1868, it was a countdown to the end of the Lakota dominance of the northern plains.
Beginning in 1863, the Union Pacific built west from Omaha, Nebraska. The Central Pacific, a workforce with over 10,000 Chinese, built east from Sacramento, California. They met at Promontory Summit in Utah in May 1869. The final golden spike of the Northern Pacific Railway completed a line in western Montana Territory on September 8, 1883. That railroad had about 6,800 miles of track linking the western federal territories and later states of Idaho, Minnesota, Montana, North Dakota, Oregon, Washington, and Wisconsin. An additional branch ran north to Winnipeg, capital of the province of Manitoba, in the New Canada.
In 1869, Interior Secretary Jacob Cox declared that this railroad had changed the conditions of the aforementioned treaties. Every station along the tracks was to become a hub of, quote, civilized settlement and exploration for mineral and agricultural wealth. Still, American military seemed to be fighting Indians all the time. Lakota, along with Cheyenne Dog Soldier allies, raided Pawnees, Ponca, Arikara, Crows, and homesteaders and railroad crews in the Central Plains to protect their hunting grounds. Major General Philip Sheridan, commander of the Department of Missouri, orchestrated a winter campaign to strike the Indians, choosing Lieutenant Colonel George Custer to lead it. Nearly 800 soldiers of Custer's 7th Cavalry converged on Black Kettle's sleeping Cheyenne village on the Washita River in today's Oklahoma, and within 2 hours had killed dozens of men, women, and children, burned the teepees, and slaughtered maybe 900 horses. Other clashes followed. Some efforts were made by U.S. officials to try to prevent incursions on Indian land. Settlers were chased out of the Black Hills in 1868 by General Alfred Terry. However, Lakota hunters had shifted further north, in large part toward the Powder River region. It was there that Crazy Horse, a man who believed he was only, quote, good for war, was celebrated for his uncompromising position toward the whites. He emerged as the embodiment of the Lakota people.
Quote, "This tribe will slowly be living with white men. But whereas I fear the land will be taken under duress without payment, you should go on home. Soon I shall come. If I were present, I would not sell it to the white man. So take the message. I will go slowly."
The Powder River villages where Sitting Bull, Gall, and Crazy Horse resided represented an open rejection of the reservation system. Spotted Tail became disenchanted with the white squatters who were already staking claims, peddling whiskey smuggled into Lakota camps in relabeled tomato and peach cans, and causing, quote, terrible debauchery. Red Cloud approached the Americans on a different tact, negotiation and head-to-head combat with the mind, so to speak. He was willing and eager to secure government rations and munitions for his people, so he welcomed Americans and their annuities in order to try to preserve the traditional life of the hunt on the high plains. At first, that is. Rumors of war brought the chiefs to Washington. The U.S. Army, assisted by Pawnee scouts, had clashed with the already weakened Cheyenne dog soldiers at Summit Springs in northwest Colorado. By then, the Union Pacific Railroad already was preventing the bison's north-south migrations and undermining their reproductive habits. In January 1870, roughly half a year after Summit Springs, the Army had attacked a peaceful Blackfoot Indian village on the Massacres River, again killing hundreds of men, women, and children. A year earlier, word already had begun to spread across the Lakota country that a large expedition was being prepared in the town of Cheyenne to explore the agricultural and mineral potential of the newly formed Wyoming Territory. The word was that the expedition would head north to, quote, drive out the Indians, meaning it would enter the heart of the unceded land between the Black Hills and the Bighorns. Chief Red Cloud continued his negotiating efforts in a very sophisticated, lawyerly way in Washington. But finally, in frustration, he demanded to be taken home at once. Another Ogallala chief, Red Dog, declared, quote,
"When the Great Father first sent out men to our people, I was poor and thin. Now I am large and stout and fat. It is because so many lies had been sent out there, and I have been stuffed full of their lies."
Sitting Bull agreed, quote,
"I shall make peace with white men slowly."
Reflecting a growing Sioux sentiment, one Indian referred to the U.S. president as, quote, a white fool and a dog without eyes or brain. The Indian tribes in the central and northern plains were dividing into what were called hostiles and friendlies. In 1871, Red Cloud returned to Fort Laramie. Quote,
I am Red Cloud. The Great Spirit raised both the white man and the Indian. I think he raised the Indian first. He raised me in this land, and it belongs to me. The white man was raised over the great waters, and his land is over there. Since they crossed the sea, I have given them room, but there are now white people all around me. I have bought a small spot of land left. The Great Spirit told me to keep it. I went and told the Great Father so. Since I came back, I have nothing more to say. I told all to the Great Father. Whatever I do, my people will do the same.
Red Cloud and Sitting Bull embodied the two broad foreign political options available to Lakotas: delicate accommodation or violent resistance, as they faced the expansionist U.S. The future celebrated warrior Crazy Horse, a shirt wearer like Sitting Bull and other elite chiefs, linked up with Black Buffalo Woman, re-entered the military corps of the Lakota Nation, and paraded the council grounds as Thunder Dreamer. With about 50 Ogallala teepees in tow, he rode north into the Yellowstone country to meet with Sitting Bull. By June 1872, without any warning, U.S. surveyors and soldiers entered the Yellowstone Valley too, searching it for the most viable Northern Pacific Railroad route. Sitting Bull and followers now could range from the North Platte into Canada all the way to the South Saskatchewan River and Lake Winnipeg. The Lakota Empire kept shifting westward, eventually reaching the clear, twisting, sporadically cottonwood-lined Bighorn River, the Yellowstone's biggest tributary.